Hi Larson, I'm going to look into your game. And before I do so, I just wanted to talk about a couple of concepts that I noticed from just a single game that I watched here. First of all, as I was telling you earlier, just try and spend more time on your game. Second thing, I noticed from your profile that you are playing way too many Blitz games. And I know it's fun, it's a bit more like a video game, but you're probably not learning much of your Blitz games. It's good if you slow down a little bit and maybe play a couple of longer games and then look at those games. And I will tell you exactly what to look at. But first, before we do that, I wanted to talk about a couple of concepts in chess. And one of the most important concepts for you will be the material. First, we have a queen. Queen is worth about 10 points, so it's like a most valuable piece. Then there is a rook that's worth about 5 points. That's for both rooks. Then you have a knight, which is worth 3 points, and a bishop that's worth a little bit more than the knight. Bishop is probably 3.2 pawns or 3.3 pawns. Bishop is usually a bit more valuable than a knight, depending on where those pieces are. If the position is closed, then the bishops are less valuable than the knights, but once the position opens, the bishops are usually stronger. And if you have a pair of bishops, then usually you are heading for a win. So that's the first concept. The reason I'm talking about this is that you need to have the feeling for what is a trade. Trade would be if you lose your bishop for a bishop or for a knight, or if you lose your rook for another rook, or if you lose maybe knight and 2 pawns for a rook. So that would be 5 points for 5 points. It's really important because lots of your decisions will be driven by the material. That's one concept that's very important. The second concept that's important on your level is time. So I will show you on a brief opening. E4, best by test. You are trying to open your queen and your bishop into the game. That doesn't mean that you will move those pieces out straight away as soon as you have a chance. But that just means that you are allowing your pieces to get out into the game. So black is playing e5. And now here where the logical part comes to play. We are trying to get our pieces out as soon as possible. Usually the light pieces go out first, those who are usually knights and the bishop, so the pieces of lesser value. We can get a knight out, and we are attacking here a pawn. Black usually defends the pawn, either by protecting it by their pawn, or developing a knight, so that's also a really nice move. They develop while you develop, because they don't want to be behind on time, or there's another opening that is counter-attacking this pawn. It says, if I take, and I'll be fine. Obviously, there's a lot more going into this opening, so usually they will just kick your knight first before they capture here. So those are the options on the beginning, and usually it's driven by logic. They just don't want you to capture this pawn for free. For example, if they play a move like this and you capture the pawn for free, now they kick you, you play here, and if you see the eval bar crawling up, you're already winning because you have a pawn for nothing, and all you have to do is just to play the game in a solid way. So black will be losing majority of their game. So if black protects with the knight, which is the most natural and logical move, then now you can get the bishop out, and you might say, I want to take this knight out. So let's say they will counterattack you here, so you can take. They take, and now you might be taking here. So that might be sort of your threat. But obviously, black has some threats of his own. They can attack with the queen, both the knight and the pawn. But again, the logic is behind bishop b5. The main logic here is to develop your piece and prepare your king for castling. So you basically want to try and get your king into safety as soon as possible, and develop your pieces as soon as possible. So once you, let's say black plays something quieter, and they might try and kick your bishop first, and then they might decide to play move like bishop e7, just again developing piece, somewhat modest. Some players might play bishop c5, bit more aggressive move, eyeing this pawn. Now you castle, and you did the most important part, which is to develop your pieces as soon as possible. Don't waste too much tempi on moving those pieces twice. And you put your king into safety. So now there will be the time to develop these pieces and maybe push some pawns forward with the pawn c3 first, then d4, trying to get nice and strong center. And another thing that's really important, that once you are developing your pieces, you're always trying to develop them towards the center. So for example, knight does not belong on the edge, belongs more to the center. Because if you have knight in the center, it influences all of these squares. So all 8, as long as it stands somewhere around this bigger center, if you get your pieces there, so if you get your pieces in the center of the board, or even better, if you have them in the dead center, then your pieces will have the maximum influence on the game. So this is the biggest part of the board that everybody's trying to fight for, and if you can get some of those red squares under your control, that's how you are going to be better in the game. So now, when we have this out of the way, so remember, very important is to play it with the one thing in mind, and that is to your piece is safe. Keep in mind that the material, I will try and explain it on your game as we are looking into your own game. So we also have one thing that we are using in chess, and that's what's guiding our moves. It's not just the material and time, but it's also always looking for what our opponent is doing and what we are doing as well at the same time. You are playing a bit difficult opening against e4. This is recommended for beginners nowadays by most streamers, but I don't believe this is the opening that will give you most experience that you should have as a beginning player, because you will quite often struggle. There are some difficult concepts, and oftentimes you will be giving the pair of bishops early, because this bishop needs to be developed, and it can be traded quite simply. So far, there's no problem with the opening that you are playing. I just don't think is the best opening to play. So you play d5. This actually, against bishop c4, this works perfectly. So you are hitting that bishop, and now it has to move twice for basically no reason. So one of the concepts is obviously to protect your pieces. So what happened here, we have a trade. So when you play d5, black is trading the pawn for a pawn. So nobody loses any material. They lost one pawn from e2 to e4, and you lost the pawn from c6 to d5. So the material is equal and everything is fine. So white obviously doesn't want to take here. If you take back, then you lost the pawn for a bishop. So it's really important. Most of your moves should be influenced by the material, but sometimes this can be broken as well when you are trying to get advantage in time. So sometimes you can sacrifice a pawn, sometimes the whole piece, sometimes even two pieces for advantage, but those positions are usually rare. Most often you are trying to play some solid game, solid development, and try and keep your pieces developed as best as possible. So two things that we are always looking for is checks and captures. So in this case, white saw that you would be capturing the bishop, so for them the priority is to move the bishop. I don't necessarily like this check, but it's okay to play it. It's not gonna lose them the game, although they are still a little bit worse according to the computer or the eval bar, whatever we are having here. So whenever you are in check, you have to defend against that. In this case, the king cannot move, so king moves are not possible, and you have two logical moves that you can play, actually three. So that is to shield your king with either the knight on c6 or d7 or shielded with the bishop. You chose the bishop, which is not particularly what I like, because I like to keep two bishops if possible, and I don't want to trade my bishop for this bishop. I would much rather play knight c6, and if white wants to take, I'll be happy because my pawn captured towards the center, and now I have a opportunity to have much more pawns in the center than my opponent. Plus, the other plus that I have is that I will have a pair of bishops, whilst white already lost that pair of bishops and all their light squares. For example, if you place your bishop here, then it may be difficult for whites to castle short. So we play bishop d7, again, nothing wrong happened here, and white plays knight c3. So again, as I said, white needs to look at captures, because when you played here, you created the situation where you are threatening to capture their bishop. So their move is protecting this bishop, but white also creates another threat that at some point they might want to be taking on d5. So, for example, when you play your next move is e5, you are putting a pawn forward. And now white might try to play bishop d7 and see if you were capturing with the knight here, they'd be able to win the pawn on d5 just like that. So it's always good to think forward and see what is going to happen. So when you play move like e5, I don't like it so much, again, for the reason that this pawn might be a weakness here eventually. I would much rather, since you decide to play bishop d7, then maybe I would take on d5, on b5 when they take back. You can then play either knight c6 to support the e5 push, or you can play e6 and keep your pawn structure nice and solid. So now you have no weaknesses, and it's usually, in those games that you are playing right now, it's usually the side that creates some weaknesses that is usually going to be struggling more. And your pawn structure is actually very solid. You have two pawns in the center against one. So that's the main advantage of if you play Caro-Kann, and if you play it in a solid way, that you will have a good advantage into an endgame. So you play e5, which is okay-ish move, but white found a really nice move that even I'm struggling to see how to deal with the threat of queen takes e5. I still cannot see how to best approach this, because this looks really as very annoying, as if we are going to be losing a pawn on e5. And I don't like move, for example, for bishop d6, because then white can maybe take here. And I'm not sure if this is losing the pawn already. So I don't see necessarily how after queen h5, how can we protect this pawn sufficiently. Because so even move like queen c7 that protects the pawn, then can run into knight d5. So I'll just show again, boom. Now our queen is attacked, so even if we attack the knight first, and now we are attacking both the bishop and the knight, he has a check, and after that check they can now move the knight somewhere safe, for example on e3, and they won a pawn, and they will be in a driving seat for the most of the game. So that's why I was thinking just sometimes you can keep it solid. And the reason as well why I would like to take here with the bishop, once you get rid of that bishop, the bishop is no longer your issue. You play e6, and now your bishop can play around your pawns. If white makes the move, for example, like d4, this pawn will be attacked by your bishop, but his bishop will have no targets as you have your pawns on the light squares. And so that's another reason why I would like you to play a certain way. So you play e5, queen h5, bishop b5, queen e5. Now this capture happened, which makes sense. And you defending with queen e7, which makes also sense. And white now makes a big mistake, because again they need to evaluate all the captures that are available to them, so they could trade a queen. So that's a trade. If a queen is for a queen, you can capture with whatever you like, and their next move should be taking the bishop. And now when you count the pawns, we have lost the pawn in the process. White has a really big threat of knight c7 check and winning our rook. And at the same time, we have also weak pawn on d5. So this would definitely be winning for white. However, when they play queen e7, they made a big blunder themselves by playing queen e3. Now, if you count your pieces, you have 2, 4, 6, 7 pieces against 2, 4, 6 pieces. So you need to calculate those moments, or be aware that you captured on b5 a bishop. Now you're up a piece. So what you do, you trade the queen. Doesn't matter if he captures with either of those pawns. This probably makes more sense, as you don't want to ruin your pawn structure too much here with the f pawn. But actually it could be a good either way, doesn't matter. And now what you do, you just save your bishop by playing something unhealthy looking like bishop c6. You are still having an extra piece. You might be trying to play move like d4, hitting the pawn behind there. But the main theme here is you are extra piece up, and with extra piece you should be able to win those games if you just remain solid and not drop any of your pieces for free. So as long as you keep eye on captures and threats in your games, you should be absolutely golden. So queen e3, and we completely ignore the possibility of capture and then saving our bishop. But even if you didn't capture the queen, you should have been just able to retreat the bishop, because you saw that they are able to capture you. But simply by retreating the bishop, you are also winning. You don't have to trade the queen, but trading the queen is good for you, so why not? So knight is, and the reason as well why I'm retreating the bishop here is because the pawn is still attacked by the knight. So you want to protect your assets if you can help it. So knight e7 was played, and now white plays knight b5, which is a really nice move. You castle, and white has another capture, which they do. You go here, and now white makes a really big blunder, because their idea is to protect the knight, because now you are threatening to take and then win the knight by capturing with the king. So once they move on f1, you capture the queen, which is perfect. And now there is something that probably you don't realize, but the king can also capture. If the piece is not protected, the king can take that piece. So right now you are again winning, because you have 5 pieces against 4 pieces. Unfortunately, this was missed. You played bishop b5. Now white is saving the knight. So now again, the material is sort of equal, and it's just a simple normal game. Now, white makes an absolute blunder, again, not seeing a simple capture. So as long as you keep looking at captures and checks, and be aware that not to trade, say, rook for their bishop or so. So if you can avoid those kind of negative trades on your side, you should be winning lots of your games. So you capture, they go there. So now here I would probably try and put some more pressure on that pawn again by bishop c5 and then double the rooks. But it's all okay the way you did it. So rook e7 is not a problem, because you are trying to double up on the e-file and put more pressure there, so absolutely fine. You could have also think maybe it might be good to try and put some pressure on a c-file as well. But it's okay the way you did it. So he plays g4. And now you play h5. So h5 is not a bad move on its own. He plays g5. Now, another concept that I wanted to talk about when you play g5 is you have done absolutely great stuff with regards to development. You developed all your pieces, your rook by castling, you protecting the king by castling long, even though at the time you castle, so it was a bit more dangerous. But in terms of development, you did everything right. You just missed a couple of captures at this stage. So knight h7 as you play this is absolutely fine. White is then protecting these pawns by connecting them. But that's also fine. But you could have thought about some transfer of the knight, for example, here. So that's one of those things when you have the knight on the edge of the board is not going to be as strong. But if you can get it, for example, here, even though it takes 3 moves, then your knight could be really strong in the center. So you play knight h7, now he plays f4. So the concept that I was trying to talk about is now you think about what is your worst piece on the board. It will be the knight on h7. So you have a couple of options how to activate the knight. But if you play knight f8 and they play f5, then again the knight has nowhere to go just yet. So maybe the good way to activate this knight could be to play g6 first and then play next the f6 pawn move. That's why you will be also opening the f-file once you trade on here. So let's say white plays something like this, and you can play f6. And if they don't capture, they can play, for example, bishop d2. They try to get some pieces out. Then you can even get rid of their strong knight that was in the center for your weak knight. And now you have the f-file open as well against the king. I know this is a bit of a hope chess, but by playing this little plan, you are trying to get your knight out and make it great again, if I may say so. So after knight h7, white protects the pawn, which is fine. And then you play h4. I can see that here you have still 24 minutes. You have plenty of time, so you can come up with some plans of your own. You can, if you don't want to improve your knights, which I appreciate is probably not your priority if you don't want to. So you could have continued with that plan that I was saying earlier, like playing rook e8, bishop c5, putting lots of pressure on this e3 pawn, for example. But definitely you shouldn't have give up any hopes. You can also try and play move like knight to c5, trying to get your knight to e4, because there's really nice outpost here. The same would be maybe also for your other knight. If you play something, I'll play a couple of moves just to give you an idea how your knights could have been placed. I'll not play the best moves for white by any means, but I just want to show you how you could have positioned your knights. And let's say white will play rook e1. So now we have a bit of a problem with this pawn, but we will not worry about it so much. We'll even let white capture it. But now look how beautiful your knights are. When you have a knight on outpost and the pawns are basically blocked in front of it, and you have no pawns to chase those knights away, these knights will be very strong on those outposts. So that's something also worth looking at, to try and get your knights on nice blockaded outposts. So let's go away from the hope chess and let's play some moves that happen. So h4 doesn't really make sense to me, and as I said, maybe focus on your less developed piece, or focus on some active plan that is going to be attacking some weakness. The reason this pawn is weakened because it's a backward pawn. It cannot be protected by another pawn. So therefore, if you want to protect this pawn, you need to bring more pieces into the game, like bishop and the rook. So you can totally tie white to that one weakness. And it cannot move forward as well, because it would be always easily captured, as there's no control of the e for the white. And also it can sometimes weaken the pawns that are already part of this pawn chain. Bishop d2, and now inexplicable move. I can see that you are perhaps tired or not sure what to do in the position. So you just gave a free piece, but you are in the position, since you remember it, when knight d6 happened, you got a free piece and you have winning advantage. So whenever you start putting pressure on your opponent, they will have less pieces to defend, and eventually their pawns will start falling as well as the rest of their game. So you should be a little bit more patient. I don't know what bishop f4 even means. It seems like you have lost your concentration completely. So you play rook e8, rook e1 happens, now capture and d4. And both h4 and d4 are telling me that you will probably have no idea how to proceed in the game. So again, if you don't know what to do in the game, just try and focus on a piece that you feel is not doing anything or is out of the game. So, because as I was saying, if you play knight f8, the f5 comes, and then again the knight has nowhere to go. But maybe you can try and go back and try and get the knight through here, because now the g5 is weak as the f4 pawn moved. But it's still probably not achieving much, because you can just simply protect the pawn, which is important. And now you would need still to try and break up these pawns so you can eventually get your knight out. But computer really hates those moves that I'm suggesting. They're saying that white is so much winning, and I don't even know why. So, this was not played, this is just my fantasy land. You play d4, white plays knight f3, and here you resign. I know the computer says you are a little bit worse, and you are probably going to lose one of these pawns. But again, I would not lose any hope here. I would try to get this knight better. You can try this plan, even though computer hates it, but at least you are going to develop your knight, or you can place just the pawn here, and then go for some of the moves like this. You can try maybe to play knight c5 and develop your knight this way. You are at least threatening some check that could be really annoying. So there's still lots to play for, and I wouldn't resign this early. As you can outplay your opponent, you had so many chances to win pieces in this game. So I definitely would not resign, and I would see this game through. If you want to be winning, you cannot just resign the games when they are still close to equal. So I hope some of those tips will help you, and I'm looking forward to see another game. You take care, buddy.